Well, we are getting breaking news out of Iran at the moment. Explosions have been heard in the capital, Tehran. At least 6 explosions have been heard. There were reports in US media that Israel is preparing to strike Iran. Israel has declared a state of emergency with a ban on gatherings, and we will bring you more information as it becomes available. But just a few more breaking news lines I can bring you. The Israeli Defense Minister has imposed a special state of emergency, as we were hearing there. That is in place immediately. Israeli radio is declaring that a state of emergency has been declared across all of Israel that will ban gatherings and the suspension of studies at all institutions. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is currently chairing an extraordinary meeting of the cabinet and the security mini cabinet. And this is in the context of rising tensions over the last few weeks between Iran and Israel. US President Donald Trump's comments recently have added to that sense of conflict as well, saying on Thursday that a strike could very well happen. These are the latest pictures from Tehran you're seeing now of those explosions. And we do have Tawhid Asadi joining us on the phone from Tehran. Tawhid, what more can you tell us about what is going on there in Tehran?
Well, it's about 3:46 local time here in Tehran, and based on what we have so far, sounds of several explosions have been heard across the capital, not necessarily at one particular point, and there are several of them. One of them was heard, and I personally heard that around 5-6 minutes ago. Another one was heard just in the heart of the capital around half an hour ago, and I can say that we've got at least 6-7 minimum explosion sounds reported to be heard in the city, in different parts of the city, western parts, the southern parts of the city. But still, we know that the state TV has confirmed the happening of these explosions. But when it comes to the cause, so far we haven't officially heard anything from Iranian sources, and right now as I'm speaking to you, there are footages, there are pictures coming from different parts of the city, including Chitgar part, including a neighborhood in the western part of the capital. We see smokes coming out from certain parts of the city. That's obviously could not be an accident, as we are hearing reports coming from the Israeli side saying that they have announced an emergency situation, meaning that there is going to be a very strong possibility for them to be involved. We heard the statements from the Israeli defense minister and also the Israeli radio saying that the army, the air forces are said to be involved in this situation. And we know that so far the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently chairing an extraordinary meeting of the cabinet and the security mini cabinet, and that means a sort of systematic initiation or a serious situation that we are experiencing right now in the Iranian capital. I cannot confirm whether these explosions mean that other parts of the country have been either attacked or not, but we have to also keep in mind that previously and over the past few weeks we heard Israelis with their strong rhetoric of a possibility of attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, and that could be there, but still we don't have any details on that. We don't have any specific confirmed information on that. We have to keep waiting for a couple of next minutes, if not hours, to see what's taking place. And last but not the least is the political context in which that incident is happening. We had just less than 24 hours ago the adoption of a resolution at the Board of Governors meeting of IAEA saying that Iran has experienced a non-compliance case pertaining to its nuclear program, and that's sort of politically important development under this context. We have to keep waiting for a couple of minutes to see what's taking place, and I'll get back to you as soon as I have further information on the event.
Absolutely, Tauhid. I'll just ask you to stay with us, please.
That it had been violating diplomatic agreements, it had to restrict what it was doing, and most significantly, had acquired a stockpile of a sizable amount of enriched nuclear fuel. They do not have a weapons program, according to U.S. intelligence, but both the United States and many European partners said the amount of fuel they had was at such a level and enriched at such a high quantity that triggered deep concern that they could quickly, if they made the political decision, seek to make a nuclear weapon. At this point, U.S. intelligence still does not believe they have a weaponization program to actually launch a nuclear weapon. But Israel has been troubled by the activity, and at this moment in time, the Israeli Prime Minister has been arguing Israel is in a weakened state because of the past attacks last year by Israel on Tehran's defenses, its aerial systems, also because of the damage to their militias with that multi-front war against Hezbollah and Hamas. So this is a moment of opportunity for the Prime Minister. As you pointed out, John, there is still a plan, at least at this point, for the top Iranian diplomat to meet with President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has been trying to urge Iran to take a deal to restrict its program. That is still scheduled for Sunday in Oman.
You can imagine that, I won't speculate. Help us understand, Margaret, how much of a challenge this is for U.S. policymakers. You've sketched why the Israelis think there's a moment of opportunity here. What are you hearing from your sources in the U.S. government?
Well, John, I'll be very transparent with you and our viewers. U.S. officials weren't entirely clear on what was going to happen and when. It was very tight hold, and we know even at this moment, we're all trying to figure out exactly what the targets are that Israel is going after. Did they see, for example, movement of material? Was there a reason this window was so specific as to why they would need to take advantage of it? But what U.S. officials are looking at is the concern, of course, about immediate blowback for U.S. personnel and staff in the region and diplomats. Remember, yesterday, the Pentagon advised the family members, the dependents of military officers in the region to leave if they wanted to. We know the State Department drew down significantly from the U.S. mission in Iraq. Iraq borders Iran. There are significant militia presence within Iraq, and so there's concern that for the thousands of U.S. troops that remain stationed in Iraq and in nearby Syria, that there could be some risk there. So there are Americans on these front lines. There's always the concern of a regional spillover. And then from some of our allies, there's also concern that if Israel targets and hits sites where there was nuclear enrichment, nuclear development, that there is also an impact from an explosion there. So we need to really understand the details of what was targeted. Were these missiles? Were these nuclear program sites? Exactly what? We're waiting on the Israeli Defense Force to brief on those details.
All right, stand by for a second, Margaret. We have more from the Israeli defense minister, and I'm reading now. Following the state of Israel's preemptive strike against Iran, a missile and drone attack against the state of Israel and its civilian population is expected in the immediate future. Senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang joins us now. Weijia, what do you got? What are they saying at the White House?
John, so far at this hour, they are saying nothing, but we do know that President Trump was hosting a congressional picnic here. We can still hear the sound from that on the South Lawn as lawmakers gather. And just around 8 o'clock, half an hour ago, he went to the West Wing. We know that because there is a military standing guard sentry outside of the West Wing entrance. And as you know, that means the president is now inside working. And so we are trying to figure out, John, whether he got a heads up before this happened and what sort of intelligence he received from the Israelis, if any, before this attack. Now, the president spoke at length about this earlier today, John, and he was explicitly asked how imminent is an Israeli attack on Iran. And he said he did not want to use that word, but added that it looks like something could very well happen. He was also asked if the Israelis had shared any direct information with him, and he said no, but it's interesting because he also said it could be a dangerous situation. Obviously, actions speak louder than words. As Margaret laid out, the administration urged American personnel in the region to evacuate. So at this hour, we do not know how much the president knows about the attack, whether he was briefed earlier. But John, even today, knowing whatever it is he obviously did know to make the assessment that the situation there could escalate quickly, he still expressed optimism that a deal with Iran could still happen. And so, you know, the question that remains unanswered, John, is whether he has now changed his red line in order to get that deal across the finish line. Just weeks ago, he made very clear himself, along with officials, that the red line in order to have a successful agreement was that Iran would not be enriching any amounts of uranium, 0 levels of enrichment. And that is something that Tehran publicly was not agreeing to. And so today, while the president said Iran could never have a nuclear weapon, that would require very high levels of enrichment. He did not answer whether they were still open to lower levels. And that is going to be critical, John, moving forward in assessing how realistic a deal is, especially as we monitor the situation in Iran and how Tehran decides to respond.
Weijia Zhang at the White House, thank you so much. Weijia, with us now is retired U.S. Marine Corps General Kenneth McKenzie, former head of U.S. Central Command and current CBS News contributor. General, what's the first thing you're going to want to look for, or first questions you would want answered after you learn about this attack?
Well, I think we begin by seeing that the Israelis probably achieved tactical surprise. There have been no reports of Israeli aircraft downed. I'm guessing this is a combination of manned low observable aircraft, stealth aircraft, long-range missiles, some short-range missiles, possibly some drones launched from within Iran. A complex attack. Looks like against the nuclear sites, but as you said, that would be the first thing I'd like to know if I were looking at this right now. Is it a narrow attack? Was it simply against the nuclear sites? Because then you may have an opportunity to scope and scale a potential Iranian response. And on the note of an Iranian response, Iran will not be able to respond immediately. It will take them a little while to bring their missiles to readiness. They're probably not ready to do that right now. The sun's going to be coming up in a little while. They will probably not want to do something during daylight. So we're looking at the next period of darkness at the very earliest time for a probable Iranian response. And as you know, John, those responses have not been particularly effective against Israel the last 2 times they've done that.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Since it was your daily concern, what's your assessment of how weakened Iran is? And two questions. One, because their proxies are weakened, but then also we've had more evidence about their ability to respond, to make an evaluation of whether they can, in fact, respond as wide and as deep as we once thought.
Iran misses Lebanese Hezbollah. That was their huge strategic hedge against Israel. Lebanese Hezbollah is out of the fight. The Syrians are out of the fight. Iran is generationally weakened right now. Now, that's against Israel. They still have a lot of weapons that they could fire against our bases in the region and against countries such as Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, where they would be able to generate more missiles than they can actually fire at Israel. So that would be an option, but that would be a marked widening of the war and probably lead to direct pressure on the Iranian regime. The ultimate goal of Iranian statecraft is regime survival. And they will make their calculation about the next move with that held as the highest objective. So it'll be real interesting to watch what the Iranians do here over the next 24 to 48 hours.
And General, just to bring our viewers up to speed here, that we are watching Iranian television there. Those are pictures of Iran at night. You see some smoke there. And then we also have some reporting. Our Jennifer Jacobs reports that the White House will convene a cabinet meeting tomorrow morning. That's per several sources. The U.S. is not a part of this operation. There's no intelligence sharing. Iran State TV says the country's air defense system is on full alert. General, if you're still with us, I just have one other question. In terms of the ladder of Israeli attacks, you mentioned that there might be a a smaller scale attack and then just kind of make a new kind of assessment. How much could Israel do without help of the United States in terms of hurting the Iranian nuclear program?
John, they can damage the Iranian nuclear program. They can give it significant damage. They cannot do the things that we could do to the Iranian nuclear program because they don't have the special ordnance that will let you go deep into the deep underground spaces where the Iranians have some of the most sensitive parts of their program concealed. So that is going to be a limit, but they can still do a significant amount of damage. And again, I don't know if they plan to come back tomorrow night. Is this a one-night event? Is it going to be a multi-day event? That's still to be discovered. The Israelis will certainly assess the damage. They'll look at how it went, and then they'll make decisions based on that. And they'll also make decisions, I'm sure, based on whatever the Iranian response is. And again, I would just emphasize the narrower the Israeli strike, the more clearly confined to the nuclear target that it is. And the nuclear target is a bunch of targets. I want to be clear, as you sort of illustrated in your very good graphic. It's a lot of targets, but as long as they're narrowly scaled against that, there's a possibility we might be able to control escalation here.
And General, what are U.S. military officials thinking right now in terms of their assets in the region that are possibly in danger? Give me a sense of the to-do list that suddenly has popped up in front of U.S. decision makers.
So everybody's at a very high state of alert right now. Probably a lot of people are in shelters. We're looking very hard at all our sensors to see what the Iranians might do next. I would think the CENTCOM commander has probably taken steps to disperse his aircraft, to position ships in different places than where they've just been, to do a variety of things, all of which will complicate Iranian targeting as they begin to decide what their next move is going to be. And I would also think that there'll probably be some clear and unambiguous messaging directed at Iran, warning them of the ultimate consequences of attacking U.S. forces and U.S. targets in the region. Because I have to believe, John, if that occurs, the Iranian regime itself will come under pressure. And I go back to a point I made earlier. Preservation of that regime remains the highest goal of Iranian statecraft.
And just holding on that point for a second, it remains the highest goal. So does that mean they're limited really in how far they're really going to go because they don't want to get a massive attack that might bring that into question?
Within their own worldview, the Iranians are realists. They know the limits of their capabilities. They've been badly exposed by the attacks of their offensive forces on Israel. Their own defensive forces have been severely attrited by prior Israeli attacks. They are at the weakest they've been in many, many years. When pressed, the Iranians are willing to negotiate. They did this during the Iran-Iraq war. It's called drinking from the poison chalice in Iranian statecraft. They've done it before. It's possible they'll do it again. I think it all depends on the nature of this attack, how successful it was, what the collateral damage is. There are a variety of factors that will go into that calculation.
All right, General McKenzie, thank you. I want to turn to Margaret Brennan. Margaret, remind us again of sort of the nature of the deal that was on the table between the United States and the Iranians, or what the terms were they were at least negotiating over.
So about 2 weeks ago, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, his friend, the real estate developer who has been the person he's put at the tip of the spear with all really highly sensitive diplomacy, transmitted a proposal via Oman, that small Gulf emirate that tries to communicate with both the West and with Iran, whose regime is really diplomatically isolated. And in that proposal, the United States floated a number of different ideas, permutations of what a potential negotiated agreement with the United States could look like. But what was clear within those option sets was that the United States does not want Iran to be able to enrich uranium, nuclear fuel, on its own territory, even if it were just at low levels of enrichment for what Iran was claiming always was a civilian nuclear program. The United States was offering, okay, we'll let you have a nuclear program that is peaceful and for power purposes, a civilian one, but you'd have to go buy that enriched fuel outside of your own borders. We don't want you to have that option. That's where Iran was really insistent that they had the right to this. The U.S. offered and actually reached out, as President Trump did in his conversation with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, to see if other states that have close relationships with Iran, as Russia does, would help with that. Russia even possibly taking some of that enriched nuclear fuel we talked about that was enriched up to that 60% level. 90% is weapons grade, so you can see how close that was and why it was making U.S. officials and other officials around the world nervous, and said you could ship that to Russia. By the way, that's what President Obama did in that 2015 diplomatic deal. So there are some ideas in this proposal that look very similar to that same diplomatic accord that President Trump exited back in 2018. Remember, until 2018, Iran had agreed to limit its program. It was only after the U.S. pulled out that they began this enrichment cycle again, and that has what has triggered this renewed concern. Their behavior in the region in terms of funding militias always continued. Their development of missiles also of concern to the United States. But the restrictions on its nuclear program are really of the utmost concern to President Trump.
Margaret Brennan, Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent for CBS and the anchor of Face the Nation. We have an Israeli, what Israel is saying, we have reporting out of Israel, that, and this is that the Iranian regime is advancing a secret program to build a nuclear weapon. This is according to an Israeli military official. Iran has enough material to make 15 nuclear bombs within days. And this, again, is according to an Israeli military official. So that is the latest. Again, Israel has just launched airstrikes into Iran. The Israeli defense minister saying in a statement that they are, quote, preemptive strikes.